Yeah, we got something in the mail the other day that's a little trick piece, and we'll share that with you. This doesn't look like much, but it is a trick little piece. You see that it's marked 164, and what this does is allows you to bolt the starter motor to the back of the block and run the engine without the bell housing. Any of you that are Ford people would know that the Ford starter motors bolt to the bell housing, and if you want to run an engine on the run stand, you got to have a bell housing on it of some type in order to mount the flywheel. So these guys have cut out this piece, probably cut it out on a water jet or plasma cutter or some other such thing that bolts to the back of the block, and then the starter bolts right to that, and Bob's your uncle. And they make it for the 164 tooth flywheel. This is for small block Ford. They make it for 164 tooth flywheel and 157. You got to let them know which one you have. So we got some bits and pieces to build up a second motor. We're going to do that, and this piece will allow us to put the engine up on the run stand and fire it up if we ever get it built. We got a little side job today, what we're playing with. We bought this small block Ford distributor, freshly rebuilt from Rock Auto, and what we're going to do is change the springs in there for the mechanical advance. And you can see that we've got some weights in there and some springs, and got kind of two arms with slots in them. One is 13 and one is 18 in this case. And what that is, that's the number of degrees of mechanical advance that you will get if you have the stop on this arm or that arm. And what you do is you double that. You have your initial timing, which would be 8, 10, 12 degrees on the dampener. And then you have advance built into the distributor, mechanical advance. In this case, that would be 13 degrees times 2 for 26 degrees of mechanical advance. So in theory, if you had 10 degrees of initial, you'd have 36 degrees of total mechanical advance. Now, vacuum advance is something else altogether, and really doesn't come into play in wide open throttle, but comes into play during partial acceleration. But this only concerns the mechanical advance. And these little springs on there control how quickly that advance is going to come in. So it takes a lot of RPM to overcome the strength of those two little springs to allow those weights to sort of fly out and move that arm across that slot and give you the advance. Now, one thing you can do is put a little small piece of hose over that arm. If you can see, that arm kind of sticks up there. And you can put a little piece of hose, thin piece of hose over that, and that will limit. So let's say that 13 degrees of mechanical advance times 2, 26 degrees, is too much. Let's say you'd like to run a little more initial, 12, 14 degrees initial. Well, you don't want 38 degrees of total necessarily. So what do? You can put a little piece of hose over that will limit that movement by maybe 2 degrees maybe more depending on how thick the hose is, but generally speaking, you don't have room for a very thick piece of hose, just a little sleeve over that, and that'll knock that 13 back to about 11. So now you're at 22, and with 12 initial, you're at 34. With 10 initial, you're at 32. That might be a little more acceptable depending on what you're doing. So what we're going to do is change those springs. Now, we've already stripped this distributor down. Basically, you take the points and condenser out. And of course, for all you computer geeks nowadays, you don't care about this because you don't know what points and condensers are, and you don't have one of these anyway. But you take the points and condenser out, and then there's a plate that mounts in there with those two screws, and you take that out. You take the vacuum advance off that fastens there, and you get access to this advance assembly underneath it all. In order to change that, if for some reason you wanted the 18 slot, there's a snap ring inside here that you've got to get out, and then you can lift that cam off the shaft, rotate it 180 degrees, put it back on. But I don't see any reason to go to the 18, really. That's a bit much. So then we have this kit, and this happens to be a Mr. Gasket kit. There's a lot of people that make them. But you have these two little dinky lightweight springs, and you take those other ones out and put these ones in. So that's what we're going to do. So what we've done is just taken our little needle nose pliers and replaced those two springs. These springs are considerably lighter than the ones that were in there. You can kind of see there the ones that came out. One is a heavy one and one is a light one. These two springs will allow the advance to come in at a lot lower RPM than what you would normally see. Normally you might not see maximum advance until 3,500 to 4,000, 4,200 RPMs. In this case, you're probably going to see maximum advance, around 2,200 to 2,500 RPM. So that should help your engine perform a little better. You can find out. And really, what you would normally do maybe is put this, in the old days anyway, put this distributor on a distributor machine, and then you could check that. But for most of us folks that don't have a distributor machine, you're just going to have to put it in the car and put your timing light on and rev the engine up and see what happens. We'll go ahead and put the breaker plate back in there and put her back together. Okay, so we put everything back together. Got our vacuum advance arm in there with a little clip on there. Be careful of that. Easy to lose. And we got our points back in and our condenser back in. Grounded the housing to the breaker plate. Easy for you to say. And the only thing left really is to set the gap in the points. And what you got to do, I can't hardly do this with not enough hands, but when this rotor comes around, the cam comes around and you're on the high spot, the points will open. So what you want to do is put your feeler gauge in there, and whatever your setting is, 15, 16,000, something like that. And you have a little place there for your screwdriver to do your adjustment. Lock your screws down and off you go. And then it's just a case of final tuning. Now, some of these vacuum advances will have a little Allen screw in that tube there that you can adjust that will change the way the vacuum advance comes in. I don't know if this particular vacuum advance on this distributor has that or not. And you can certainly buy aftermarket vacuum advances that are adjustable. The vacuum advance on a street machine is really important. It really helps with the drivability of the car and doesn't hurt the performance. So, in this case, we'll just leave it the way it is. When we get the engine done, we'll see how it works.